From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoop heads. This is episode 553. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. Joining me, my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, as always, we've got some fun stuff to talk about this week, so please, tip us off.
So first, we will discuss a recent co-op session we had on NBA 2K13 using the 95-96 URB roster. Second, we will discuss a new feature we would like added to NBA 2K26. And lastly, we choose 3 legends from the past that we would like to see play in today's NBA. So Andrew reached out to me, and he wanted to get a quick gaming session in. I asked him what he wanted to play, and he told me, quote, a retro season with modern mechanics, end quote. So I chose NBA 2K13 for the game, and I chose the 95-96 season. So we used the URB mod, as I stated prior, and 2K13, Andrew, it has awesome right stick dribbling, a great post game, strong shooting, and a great pace. A lot of the mechanics that are in the newest 2K, NBA 2K25, are in NBA 2K13, even though NBA 2K13 came out 12 years earlier. So I thought that was a fitting choice. And I know that NBA 2K13 is one of your favorite 2Ks of all time, especially because it was the introduction to right stick dribbling, which you loved in the NBA Live series. So in this game, we use the Magic, led by Shaq and Penny, versus the CPU Hawks, led by Steve Smith. And Steve Smith did kill us in this game. The Hawks were at home. But we did win this game. We won it in pretty solid fashion. I think we won by close to 20 points. But, yeah, that scratched the itch for you.
Well, first of all, I have to give you, as always, a lot of credit for hosting. You are the stronger host. You put together a fantastic video of a great session. But also, I need to give you credit here, Derek, because so many times I'll reach out to you and say, hey, do you feel like playing? And you say to me, what do you feel like playing? Sometimes I have an answer. Sometimes I have an idea in mind. Or I'll just say, one of our favorites. Or I will throw out a very generic, unhelpful suggestion like that, something retro with modernish mechanics, and you know what I like, Derek? You picked the right teams, the right game, the right roster, 1996. So yeah, I really appreciated your choice.
Well, we're roughly the same age, and we have a lot of the same interests.
True.
Basketball-wise, and a lot of the same favorite players and teams, so it makes it pretty easy. Normally, when I'm choosing something that I think you'll want to play, it's definitely something that I also want to play.
It helps.
But it's also, it definitely helps. And I also want to point out that we have connected so many times on basketball video games, but I'm pretty sure that's the first time that we've ever used Shaq and Penny.
I think so.
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've never played co-op using that team. And because the icons were turned off, the icons underneath the player, Andrew ended up having to lock. And I asked Andrew, I said, do you want to lock on Shaq or do you want to lock on Penny? And you chose Shaq. And I think that worked out really well. It allowed me to kind of, run the show and find you and throw you some fun oops and whatnot. And it ended up actually resulting in you leading the game and scoring you at 32 points with Shaq. And, you had a couple nice half hooks in there. You were running the floor. I was able to hit you with a few oops, etc. So, yeah, I think that dynamic of you locking and me controlling the rest of the players, I think it works well. And honestly, I think more players should pursue that when playing with friends. I think it's a great way to play. My brother and I sometimes do that with legends and whatnot. So yeah, that worked out well.
It definitely helped with the icons being disabled. And yes, we should definitely try that again. I think locking on the big man really worked for my style of play, and as you said, allowing you to run the show and trying to pull off some of those signature Penny moves, trying to get that step back with Penny is something you just always have to do in every game. And 2K13 does hold up incredibly well. I haven't actually played it for a while, as you can probably tell, getting used to the controls in the early going there, and I'm very used to 2K14 controls, obviously, because that is what I'm playing these days, or have been playing a lot of since 2021, since getting back into it and really coming to appreciate it. And they do have very similar controls, but of course 2K14 brought in the combined Pro Stick, which 2K13 does have shooting on the right stick as well if you hold down the modifier. I forgot about that, so I had an unfortunate incident that didn't make the highlight reel. thankfully, where I got out on the break with Shaq, and I went to do a signature dunk, and forgetting that it wasn't 2K14, just holding back on the stick, and did a behind-the-back dribble instead. Still got the bucket, of course, and we had the game well in hand, but it goes to show that even when there are similarities with games, you do need to adjust the controls.
That's the biggest difference, too, between 2K13 and 2K14.
Makes a difference, yeah.
It's the fact that the right stick for 2K13 is only used for dribbling. And in NBA 2K14, we started being able to use it on drives and for shooting. So, Andrew, I just want to go over a quick 95-96 NBA season summary because that's the season that we chose. So, obviously, the league champion was the Chicago Bulls. This was their historic 72-10 season. Most valuable player was obviously MJ with 30.4 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, and 4.3 assists. Rookie of the year was Damon Stoudemire, who averaged 19 points a game and 9.3 assists a game for the Raptors. Points per game leader was 30.4, again for MJ. Rebounds per game, Dennis Rodman with 14.9 per game. And assists per game leader was John Stockton with 11.2. The Orlando Magic, the team that we used, had the best record by far in the Atlantic Division. They went 60-22. The next best record in the Atlantic was the New York Knicks with 47-35. The Central Division, the Atlanta Hawks, who we played against, were fourth. They went 46-36. And obviously the top record in the Central was the Bulls at 72-10. But obviously the playoffs held special meaning because it was a rematch for the Orlando Magic and the Chicago Bulls. And obviously the previous year, the Magic knocked out the Bulls when MJ returned. And this was Jordan's revenge. And the Bulls won that series in a sweep 4-0 over Orlando. So, with Orlando, they actually had 5 people in the double figures that season. Dennis Scott, 17.5 points per game. Penny, who received some MVP votes, 21.7 points per game. Horace Grant, 13.4. Shaq, 26.6 in only 54 games. And Nick Anderson at 14.7. And then for the Hawks, they had multiple people in double figures actually as well. They had Steve Smith, 18.1. Mookie Blaylock, 15.7. Christian Laettner, who was traded to them at the halfway point of the season. He averaged 14.2. Stacey Augmon, 12.7. And Andrew Lang, 12.9. So they had quite a few people in the double figures there, but that's just kind of a recap of the 95-96 season.
And one of my all-time favorite seasons, it is the season where I really got into basketball, so it's always going to be extra nostalgic for me. No surprises there. It's the season that I've made a couple of times in previous games, Live 2001 and Live 2004. We've played with those old mods, actually. You and I, we've connected on both and played with them. That was a lot of fun as well. So yeah, I will always love revisiting the 96 season. And of course, dusting off a game like NBA Live 96, which is also a favourite and set in that season. Obviously, love revisiting that as well. But yeah, it's so nostalgic to go back and see those rosters. That is an opening night roster, I believe, or certainly an early season roster. Andrew Lang still there on the Hawks, obviously. And he was kind of a problem. He had a pretty nice drive against me with Shaq.
He did. And the thing is that Andrew Lang was part of the Christian Laettner trade, right?
Yep.
So you can't count them together as far as averaging double figures for the team. He played 20 games with Minnesota to end the season, averaged 8.8 points. His stats dipped. As did his minutes from when he was playing with the Hawks. But he was a big part of that Hawks team before he got traded. He was playing 35.6 minutes per game. And yeah, during that session, he actually did some damage to us.
Andrew Lang, of course, one of the few players in NBA history to wear number 28. Born on, I believe, June 28th, drafted 28th overall in the draft back in the day. So 28 was a very special number to him.
Yeah, and he actually had a long NBA career. He played from 1988 to 2000, so from age 22 to age 33. And according to Basketball Reference, Andrew, that he made over $15 million in his career. So not bad for Andrew Lang.
And did you also notice Spud Webb, a familiar face back in a familiar place, a very short return stint for the first half of the 96 season before also being part of that trade?
Those are always weird, though, to me.
Yeah.
I find these players going back to a franchise they were with when they were younger and possibly in their prime when they were younger. Maybe they put up their best numbers with that franchise, and then going back when they're not half the player they were that they were. And you had Scottie Pippen return to the Chicago Bulls in 03-04, and obviously a complete shell of his former self. And I know that probably didn't sit too well with you. You might have been excited to see him in a Bulls uniform again, but watching him on the court, it's not the same.
Yeah, sentimentally, it was nice to see him back and to finish his career with the Bulls, although he did consider comebacks with the Cavs and Lakers and Spurs, and he wanted to come back in about 2006, 2007 and go for that 7th championship. But yeah, it was kind of nice seeing him back on the Bulls for sentimental reasons, but yeah, a very weird stint, and like you say, a shell of himself. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, the first of 2 community questions. I asked, you can only choose 3 of these players to be brought into today's NBA in their prime. Who do you choose? And the names I listed were Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaq, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, Julius Erving, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Charles Barkley. So I have my 3 choices. I'm sure you have yours. Why don't you kick us off?
As always, when you have MJ in the conversation, Derek, I wish I could be more original with one of my picks, but obviously I'm going to bring my all-time favorite, the player that I consider to be the greatest of all time as well. I would love to bring Prime MJ into the current NBA, and I'd also like him to see all of the comments that people have been making about him, especially some of the talking heads, and just watching him wreak havoc on the league.
Yeah, I would love to see anybody in today's NBA try to stay in front of MJ, or guard him in the post, or challenge him on defense. Nobody is getting close to doing the things MJ could do on the floor today. The amount of social media attention, Andrew, that his game would receive would be insane. He would be the favorite player of most kids today. And, that's just like when we were growing up. Like, it wouldn't be any different. In fact, he would be seen by more people today on social media. His highlights would be seen. He would have even more fans in today's NBA. These kids would be trying to emulate him when they played themselves. Yeah, I think just with the lax defensive rules, with the lack of focus on strength in today's game, I think Jordan would be just incredibly strong for his position, or for any position for that matter. I think he would be unstoppable going to the rim, even more unstoppable than he was when he was averaging 37.1 in the NBA and consistently scoring 30 points per game, season in, season out, and whatnot. And I just think his highlights, like nobody is doing even close to what MJ was doing in today's NBA. I just think he would be all over social media. It would be awesome. So yeah, he's also my first choice.
And I feel like if we are opening up this rip in space-time and pulling Prime MJ into the present, then I think that his contract with the Bulls is still valid. So he'd have to go to Chicago, Derek. That's just only fair.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't balk at that idea.
No,
I mean,
I'm advocating for it.
It's where he belongs. How do you think he would fit in with this team?
Well, I think certainly Zach LaVine is taking a back seat. That's for sure.
So my next choice is Wilt Chamberlain. And that was tough because Hakeem Olajuwon was a very close second. But Chamberlain, he was an Olympic-level athlete. He had the post fade, the hook shots, the dipper lay-in, the effortless throwdowns. He was a freak of nature, Andrew. I would love to see him swatting shots followed by running the floor, or grabbing a rebound, quickly outletting and running down the center of the court like a gazelle. I think young Chamberlain in today's NBA would do a good job staying with the quick players on the perimeter, as well as shutting stuff down at the rim. I just don't see anybody matching up with him in today's NBA. I can't imagine Jokic trying to shut him down in the post or around the rim. I can't imagine Jokic trying to run the floor with him. Same with guys like Embiid, who looks like he's running at half speed most of the time. Anyway, you've seen some of the footage of Chamberlain when he was young and in his prime, pre-Lakers Chamberlain, and you saw how much of a blur he was getting up and down the court. I just think he would get so many easy baskets, even just running down the center of the floor. And I don't think there's a defender in today's NBA that would be able to protect the rim close to as well as Chamberlain would. So he is my second choice.
You might have to bring back Hakeem Olajuwon and Shaq to just to contend with Wilt Chamberlain in the post there. What a tremendous athlete, obviously. The legends of how they had to change the free throw rules because he would leap from the free throw line and drop in the foul shots before they said you can't jump over the line, you can't cross the line on a free throw attempt. Had to change those rules. And I'll echo these sentiments when I talk about the big man that I would bring into the present, but people talk about, obviously, how the game has changed, and we talked about evolution, or the evolution argument last week, but if you brought in somebody like Wilt, who can run the floor like that, who can just dominate inside, he is going to change the league, then have to adjust to that. They would need to focus on tougher interior defense again, and also other players trying to emulate that style if you brought Wilt into the modern game. That's what people don't realize, that if you have these impactful players that change the game, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to have that same impact as what MJ, as we just said. If you bring Wilt into the modern game, then you're going to have to contend with that. It doesn't matter that he's not shooting threes.
Right. You got to think about this. You really think that the Pelicans would start Zion at center if he was up against Wilt Chamberlain? Right? Like, you wouldn't see these small ball lineups. You wouldn't see the Celtics go small with Tatum at, trying to contend with Chamberlain at the rim. Right. I think that it would absolutely change the way teams build their rosters when you have a guy like that, in the league and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely agree there.
And you think about how Wilt Chamberlain's career, in some ways, was cut short because he did want to make that jump to the ABA, was blocked, ended up becoming a coach in the ABA for San Diego, which was kind of an ill-fated attempt there, not really what he wanted to do, not really having that coach's mindset. But there was also that talk of him possibly coming back in the early 80s or mid-80s. Teams reached out to him. He ultimately declined, didn't want to just be a sideshow, but a lot of people thought that he could still play, was joining scrimmages and more than holding his own against those players. How amazing would it have been if he'd had a Kareem-like career, or the longevity of a LeBron James, for example, playing 20, 21, 22 seasons in the league. Wilt was at one time the all-time leading scorer, obviously, but could have had 40, 45, 50,000 points.
There were numerous people in the 80s that saw him play in charity events, pickup games, etc., that stated Chamberlain was still shutting everything down at the rim and was still an NBA level athlete, and that he could have played, and that he would have still been an excellent NBA player. And that's, 7+ years, actually over a decade after he retired and whatnot. So yeah, just an unbelievable freak athlete and amazing player. So who was your second choice?
So for similar reasons that you picked Wilt, I'm taking Shaq. And I think it's going to be the same thing, that you bring this dominant big who was just unstoppable in the paint, just so overpowering. We've talked before about the hits that Shaq used to take back in the day, just tanking all those hits around the rim and still finishing as he did, shooting 55+%, 60%, over 60% from the field against some very tough competition at center. Once again, people say, what about the free throws? What about the lack of range on the jump shot? And certainly a player like a Wilt or Hakeem Olajuwon, a Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, that did have more of a shooting touch, would have that versatility, and they would also dominate the modern game as well. But just imagine Shaq, powerful as he was, athletic as he was in his prime, as you know, Derek, just, again, the kind of destruction he would wreak on the NBA these days. And it would change the game. If you have a player like Shaq who can post up like that, who can get anything he wants at the rim, virtually unstoppable against defense that is not used to that kind of power and that kind of inside game, then it will change the style of play. You are going to have different styles of play in the league, which is something that we loved back in the day. You're going to have to contend with that. I'm not saying that the league would completely go away from the three-pointer, because obviously players like Steph Curry have used that to great advantage, but Shaq would change the game, and he would be incredibly fun to watch.
teams would build their rosters around trying to stop him.
As they did.
That's what they were doing in the exactly. That's what they were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s. They were building their rosters around the idea of being able to contend with Shaq.
15 fouls to give.
I also want to, right, exactly. But I also want to point something out. One thing that's not being talked about here is how Wilt Chamberlain and Shaq would handle today's height of access and height of social media. I think that could hurt their focus. Both of them were media hogs, right?
Yes.
Both of them like to be involved in a lot of activities outside of basketball. I think that they would absolutely eat up the attention, and a lot of that attention would make it so they focused on things other than basketball, which you wouldn't have to worry about with a guy like Hakeem, right? Hakeem Olajuwon was a completely different personality. He wasn't a media hog. He wasn't about the commercials and having his face plastered everywhere. So I think that there's a lot of people who respond to this who chose Hakeem. I think that Hakeem would handle today's height of access, height of social media better than both Shaq and Wilt would.
Oh, undoubtedly. And of course, he would also be a very fun player to watch and bring back that post game and really revolutionize that. I absolutely agree.
I would love for him to come back, Andrew, just so he could torch Joel Embiid. I think those comparisons are foolish. I don't think Embiid is close to the athlete that Hakeem was. I think he's way more methodical. I don't think he has the same elevation on his shot. I don't think that he moves even close to as well as Hakeem Olajuwon. I don't think he has the overall repertoire, especially inside the 3-point line, that Hakeem did, and I don't think that he's the defender that Hakeem was. I think Hakeem also ran the floor better, and I think he was much tougher. I just don't like that comparison because I don't think that Joel Embiid is in the same league or conversation as Hakeem. So I would love to see Hakeem come back and just absolutely destroy him.
Agreed. And before we get too far past it, I absolutely agree as well that Shaq would have those distractions, and it might hurt his PR, it might hurt his image to have social media, this being the height of social media, of course. In fact, that was a criticism of him in his Orlando Magic days, that he was too distracted, making movies, making Blue Chips, etc., and the other movies.
Rapping, yeah, he was trying to make a rap.
That's right, trying to kind of be this multimedia star on top of being a basketball superstar as well. So he was definitely criticized for letting his focus wander to those distractions and those other opportunities away from basketball. So that certainly could be a thing, and this is an age where athletes are becoming influencers, if you will, and branching out into many other ventures. So that is absolutely a possibility. And I absolutely agree with the Olajuwon versus Embiid debate there, such as it is. But, credit to Embiid, he is still a fine player. What I really smirk at, Derek, is that comparison we once saw that somebody tried to argue that Al Horford is better than Olajuwon. Now, that was ridiculous.
The person stated that these are the players in today's game that are more skilled than Hakeem Olajuwon. And he's going down the list, and he lists Al Horford. And his reason for it was that Al Horford was a 3-level scorer, that just because Al Horford could hit the 3, that it made him a more skilled basketball player than Hakeem Olajuwon. If you say something like that, if you think anything like that, you know absolutely nothing about basketball. You don't understand the sport. It's not just you don't understand those two players. You don't understand the sport. The problem is the guy that said this was kind of a popular roster maker over on Operation Sports and whatnot. And that, I would never use one of his rosters after seeing that post, because that guy doesn't know what the hell he is talking about.
You've seen that sometimes with people in the community that have made rosters, PC or console, that when their roster gets very popular, they think that their knowledge of the NBA is infallible. But it's so arrogant, so misguided to buy into your own hype like that.
So, Andrew, my third choice, and this was really tough because it was between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. I went with Larry Bird. So it's the all-around game. It's the passing, the shooting, the rebounding. It's the smart defense. It's the quick fades over his shoulder. It's the efficiency. I just think Bird would average far more than his peak in today's NBA. His peak scoring average in a single season was 29.9. I think he would get even better looks at threes. he would be told to shoot more threes. He was a 40% three-point shooter for most of his career. I think that the fact that there's a landing space foul rule that makes it so defenders won't hard contest him on threes, he can just shoot without care all game long. I think that he would be just an absolute nightmare in the post and on mismatches if they actually used him that way, which, a lot of teams don't go to mismatches today like they should. But I think that Larry's toughness and his all-around game, I just think he would be unstoppable in today's NBA. I want to point something out about Magic Johnson. The reason why I didn't choose him is because I don't think he would be appreciated as much in today's NBA. I think that Magic thrived on players running their lane. And he was, be able to throw that no-look pass, be able to, put the ball ahead of a player, pass to a spot instead of a player, and that player run it down and score. I don't think the players today and the teams today play the right way in order to utilize Magic's skill set. I think that Magic would be on the break and he'd be looking for somebody to run their lane, and they would fade out to the 3-point line and they would take a bad shot and it would piss Magic off, right? Like, I don't think that Magic's dribbling style, I don't think that his high motor and the way that he played would be utilized properly in today's game. So that's why I ended up really going with Larry overall. I think Larry's skill set would be more utilized in today's NBA. And that's a damn shame, because I think that Magic was just absolutely ridiculous. In my opinion, he's easily the best point guard in NBA history. So I hate to say that, but I just don't think the teams today play Magic style of basketball.
No, I see that. I think that is absolutely sound reasoning, for sure. And as we've mentioned before, Derek, we don't share our picks with each other before we start recording. We want to surprise each other with them during the course of the conversation. And to that point, I also was tossing up between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. In fact, part of me wanted to say MJ, Bird, and Magic. Bring back those three. Those are my picks for the top three of all time, as I've mentioned before. But I, too, went with Larry Bird for the similar reasons, as you say, would suit the three-point barrage that we have these days. What I also enjoy about bringing prime Larry Bird into the current NBA is that it will really emphasize how you don't have to be a top-flight athlete by NBA standards. Larry Bird was still an excellent athlete. He just wasn't Dominic Wilkins, or Clyde Drexler, or Michael Jordan, or Magic Johnson with his athleticism. But he had the skill, just as Jokic, just as Doncic have these days. And I'd love to have prime Bird from back in the day in the modern NBA demonstrating that is still a thing, that he is still an above-average athlete compared to the general population. And in the NBA, he is still a solid athlete and tremendously skilled. And I've been reading some stories recently, Derek, from Dominic Wilkins and Clyde Drexler. There's a reason that I mentioned them, talking about how they came into the league and were being trash-talked by Larry Bird, and how he was just absolutely smoking them. And
same with Sean Kemp.
Absolutely.
And Jason Williams. Power forward Jason Williams. The stories about him just trash-talking those guys and stating, like, I'm going to, drop this shot right in your face, like he said to Xavier McDaniel, or, get this rookie off me I think it was when Sean Kemp was guarding him. And then he started schooling Sean Kemp, and Sean Kemp had to be taken out of the game. Like, yeah, the story. Can you imagine some of the weak-minded NBA players today trying to handle Larry Bird's trash talk? Like, I'm sorry, I would love to see Bird trash talking Tyrese Halliburton and just to wipe that ridiculous smile off his face that he has all game and whatnot. Like, I would love to see Bird just shut a lot of these guys up. Like a guy like Anthony Edwards, who I do like his game, but he talks a lot of crap. I would love to see Bird just be like, I'm going to score 30 on you right now, and just score 30 on Anthony Edwards and just shut him up. Like, I would absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think the Sean Kemp story was him saying, oh, so you're the kid who broke some of my records in Indiana. And Kemp was like, yep, that was me. And Bird's like, okay, well, welcome to the league, Rook. And then proceeded, as you say, to just dominate. And that was an older Larry Bird who was already suffering those back issues that would probably a premature end to his career, all things considered. And yeah, just trash-talking Neek and Drexler, these fantastic athletes who could defend and certainly could score. And sure, even if they weren't quite the players yet that they would become when they entered the NBA, still tremendous college players, still coming to the league with great potential and obviously the skill to become the superstars that they eventually were. But yeah, just the way that Larry Bird would trash-talk them and then back up that trash-talk with his play, yeah, it'd be so fun to watch in the modern NBA. And like you say, his game would be suited for it.
I talked about this on a prior NLSC podcast. When Bird in 91-92 put up 49 points on the Trailblazers, it was a 49-point triple-double. He was guarded by Cliff Robinson, Buck Williams, and Clyde Drexler throughout the game. And I believe Kersey also switched on to him at one point. And go ahead and tell me that those guys aren't great athletes. They are great athletes for any era. Long, lengthy, strong, athletic players. And Bird made them look stupid. Turning over his shoulder, high arcing fadeaways, etc. Throwing an up fake and stepping in and shooting. Ball fakes into a shot, in the post, dominating with his skill and whatnot. And that Larry basically had a broken back, Andrew, right? That Larry was not moving well, and they could not guard him to the tune of 49 points. So I want to point out that if you ever want a point of reference of how Larry could dominate in today's NBA, look no further than that game where he could barely move and he was just torching everybody on the Blazers.
Michael Jordan said it when he talked about pushing for Bird to be on the Dream Team, saying that this isn't just a legacy addition or a kind of a ceremonial thing. He can still go. We need Larry on this team to be a part of this.
Exactly. So I also want to say, Andrew, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is an honorable mention here, and I kind of regret not making him a choice. Can you imagine any player in today's NBA trying to block Kareem's skyhook? I would love to just sit back and watch him skyhook players to death. He was 7'2", and he would be unstoppable on offense and be incredible on defense. My brother and I just absolutely marvel at 70s and early 80s Kareem. He made the game look so effortless. His dunks look stupid because they're so effortless. He had ridiculously long arms. He could dominate the game in so many different ways. He was unbelievable at running the floor. Yeah. I wonder how many people would have chosen Kareem if I had put him as a choice.
And of course it makes sense to limit the number of choices to a select handful of players, but yeah, absolutely an honorable mention. The NBA did get to see Kareem versus Wilt, so that was special in the early stages of his career and the late stages of Wilt's career, obviously. I think today, Kareem versus Wemby would be a pretty fun matchup.
I don't think Wemby moves as well as Wilt up and down the court. I don't think he's as good or as strong of an athlete.
Oh, true.
And some of our listeners might be like, "What?" You got to understand that Chamberlain was an Olympic level athlete. If you go back and watch young prime Wilt, the way he was moving, the speed up and down the court, and whatnot. And apparently there were stories about some ridiculous bench press milestones that he was able to achieve as well. So he's super strong, and players have reported about how strong he was. I don't think that Wemby is as an overall great athlete, and I think that Chamberlain would probably be able to move him around quite a bit. So I think it would be a fun matchup to watch, but I think Wilt would win that one for those reasons. So, Andrew, let's get to the community responses. At B-Ball Video Game states Shaq, Hakeem, and Wilt going all bigs because even though today's NBA is a shooter's league, I think these guys would still dominate playing the same way they did in their eras. Is Wemby, Chet Holmgren, etc. really stopping any of these guys? Doubt it. Yeah, I completely agree. He says that kind of for the same reasons that we already gave for those players.
No, I see the reasoning, bringing back those three legendary bigs, because we do have talented wing players these days. I can't go past MJ because of personal bias, but again, I certainly see the logic. And another point about Wilt, you can go back and see a photo from the 80s when he was in one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan movies, and he is just towering over Arnie, who is no small man himself, obviously, but also Andre the Giant, the famous wrestler, of course, visited them on the set, and he was a tall man, obviously. He was Andre the Giant. He had lost a bit of height by that point because of back issues and was hunched over and everything. But the WWF wasn't too happy about that photo being out there because Andre was being billed at that time still as 7'4". They were inflating his height. And standing next to Wilt, you could tell that Andre was definitely not 7'4" or above.
Yeah, Wilt was a monster. I also want to point something out about Wemby before I move on to the next response. I watched some of his highlights from his last couple of games. He does not move as well as Ralph Sampson did. And I posted the highlights of Ralph Sampson, and he was billed as the same height as Wemby. He was listed at 7'4". I think that Wemby is not as fast up and down the court. And I don't think he's as smooth overall with a lot of his movement as Sampson was. Granted, I like Wemby. I like his personality. I like his media appearances. I like his skill set. I'd like to see him a little, what he can do a little bit more around the rim and whatnot. But I think that, I'm rooting for Wemby. I like him. I'm just saying that I don't think that he's the athlete that Ralph Sampson was or Wilt Chamberlain, etc. So Andrew at Bucky T states, I love Kobe, but I'm going with MJ, Shaq, and Sir Charles. And obviously we talked about Barkley on our previous episode and talked about how great he would be in today's NBA. Teddy Bear the Gamer states Jordan, Olajuwon, and Magic. Roy states, this is super tough. For me personally, it is his airness, Wilt, or Shaq, and then Larry or Barkley. Wilt or Shaq would be almost unstoppable today with the lack of big men. His airness, like Kobe, would be getting over 50 a game and winning titles because of his desire. He goes on to state, also the skills of all these players would be on full display each and every night. Larry would be very much at home with ball handling, shooting, anywhere and everywhere, making free throws. And in parentheses, another foreign concept in today's NBA. Sir Charles would be in the post, back to basket and facing the basket game, putting the ball on the floor, or, quote, deck, end quote, if I may use Derek's phrase. I love saying putting the ball on the deck. Also, people forget Charles could run the floor too, and all the players' defense skills would also put the current NBA on notice. And lastly, he states, this would be amazing to see nightly. In the words of John D. Loudermilk, quote, break my mind, end quote, or Shakespeare, quote, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, end quote. And then he states, thank you for all the choices. All would be great to see play now, and I think all would break and make the league better. Royce loves coming in with memorable quotes, and relevant quotes. I definitely agree with what he's talking about as far as Kobe and MJ, et cetera, just being absolutely dominant scorers in today's NBA because of that handicap defense, because of their will to win and their skill sets, et cetera. So, yeah, thanks for the response, Royce.
And Royce, this week's Monday Tip-Off, which will be out by the time that this podcast goes live, I am talking about my retro gaming and comparing it to Robert Frost's famous poem, The Road Not Taken, so I too will make some literary references there. Hope you enjoy that one. And yeah, I totally agree. Obviously, we are often in agreement with Royce when it comes to the legends of the game. Around about the same age as him, grew up with those players, and Chuck would definitely be an exciting player to watch today. And I do wonder, we talked about the social media aspect of Wilt and Shaq, whether if he did grow up in this era, whether Chuck would be on social media and making those pronouncements on social media. But then if we're just bringing him from the past, prime Barkley bringing him through the time warp into the current game, he's probably going to have a similar approach to social media and just stay off it, which is very sensible.
Kids today would love prime Chuck's attitude. His, the way he was even back then, if you brought that straight into the league now and you drop Charles Barkley in and he was making those immediate appearances, I think kids would get a kick out of Sir Charles. I think that he would have a lot of fans. As far as quotes, is there anything more poetic though, Andrew, than I love this game? Oh, it's still the best.
Iconic, yeah.
Chuck LA states MJ, Hakeem, and Shaq, so another vote for Hakeem. Mike P, so at Mike Pritchard, states, for me personally, I'm picking Jordan first because of the way he changed the game. Kobe for being a great student and respecting Jordan's game so much that he spoke with MJ and picked his brains. He also had an amazing work ethic to carry the torch. And then Akeem for his play on both sides, plus his fundamentals. At N. Castellina states MJ, Hakeem, and Bird or Magic. Myron states MJ, Kobe, and Wilt. So another vote for MJ and Kobe to be brought into today's NBA. And then CQ at Coach Q states MJ, Kobe, and Bird. So yeah, quite a few people actually wanting MJ and Kobe to be brought into today's NBA. And I bet if I had put Tracy McGrady, Andrew, on that list, he would have been chosen by a few people as well.
Oh, definitely. And it should be noted that of the players you chose, only Kobe and Shaq were teammates. And that is the other great thing about all of these players, is that bringing them into the league today, I imagine they would still be, for the most part, adversaries. And that was what made the game so great back in the day, seeing these players go against each other.
Absolutely. You don't see enough of that now. Players are swapping teams too often. Teams aren't staying together long enough, etc. So, Andrew, we had 2 responses on Discord. Juicy Shaq Meat states 1, Jordan, enough said. 2, Olajuwon, to inspire modern big men to be more creative in the low post. And 3, Barkley. He'd probably feast during this era's small ball play style. Yeah, Barkley was feasting in the paint, on the block, running the floor, etc. when bigs roam the paint, right? When more bigs and rim protectors were roaming the paint. I can't imagine how silly it would look with Barkley in today's NBA running the floor the way he did back then. He would be an absolute freak athlete. Today, he'd be so fun to watch. I think that he would absolutely dominate in today's game. And then lastly, ZCB44 states, Michael Jordan, do I really need to give a reason? Magic Johnson, watching him and his style in the more finesse-based modern era would be really cool, would fit right in. And Charles Barkley again. Not a lot of players like Chuck these days, so it would be interesting to see him in the current NBA. So that's all the responses, Andrew, that we have for that one.
Fantastic responses. And ZCB44 does touch on something there as well, that you don't see a lot of players like Chuck these days. Those different styles is what we appreciated back in the day. Different styles of team play, different strategies, different styles of players, and see how they would trade off advantages and disadvantages in their style of play, and both as a team and individual players, was what made the game so exciting. It wasn't based on algorithms and analytics and, there's only one right way to play. No, that's just so uncreative. Such an uncreative way of thinking, to think that there's only one way to play and to win in the NBA. History says that many different styles can win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also want to point out that there was one more response on X at Epileptic Rabbit, stated, Wilt and Michael put 2 frauds to bed in one. Just want to say, if you're calling Michael Jordan a fraud, for his basketball skills and what he was able to do on the court, same with Wilt and whatnot. I'm sorry, but, and no disrespect meant here, but you probably don't know what you're talking about. You probably don't know your history, and you probably don't know much about basketball.
Exactly.
So, Andrew, we're going to end this episode on the second community question, which was, if given the option to choose one of these new features to add to NBA 2K26, which would you choose? The ability to break the glass, a choose to taunt option, a choose to fight option, or a draw up a play clipboard option during timeouts. So I'm going to give my response first. So if I was being selfish, Andrew, I would want the ability to break the backboard the most. So I'd want that ability to shatter the glass on a throwdown. It would be amazing. But if I was thinking big picture, what would be best for the majority? It would be the ability to draw up a play on a clipboard during a timeout. And the way I'm envisioning this working is, you go into a timeout and you can push a button to bring up the clipboard, and the clipboard comes up on the screen. It's like big on the screen. It's taking up most of the screen, and you can place your players on the court where you want them, and you can draw up where they move, where the ball will move, etc. And then when you get out on the court, your players go to those spots and they do that action, right? How cool would that be? right? If you could do that. I think that that would actually be utilized by a lot of people if it was a feature in NBA 2K26. So what about you? What's your choice?
Well, once again, we did not compare notes before we started recording. I thought I was going to be so unexpected, off the wall, by saying break the backboard, but that is actually my pick as well, for similar reasons. And I do see the advantage of design to play, draw to play. We have seen that in previous games. I think it was maybe College Hoops 2K7 or College Hoops 2K8. One of the college basketball games did have a design to play feature. So this is something we have seen before. It would be really cool. I can't deny that. I can't deny that it would be probably the wider used feature and the more useful feature. But I don't know, man. I just want to see glass flying. I want to see backboard shattering in a modern sim title with all the detail we have of modern graphics, just tearing down the backboard or shattering it completely. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. It was awesome in Coach K college basketball. Can you imagine what it would look like with today's modern graphics? It would be amazing. And like if the player has to like move out of the way really quick as the glass is falling, like he runs out of the way, like kind of like Shaq did when one of the times that he broke the backboard and whatnot. Yeah, that would be awesome. And I would love to put those plays as number one in the NLSC top 10 plays of the week.
And I think for me, I also like these little details that you might just discover when playing the game. Obviously, having deep features like create a play is great and desirable. And if I'm not being selfish about my pick, then yes, that probably is the best way to go for NBA 2K26, bringing back an idea like that. But yeah, I just love those little things in basketball games that you just discover, that animation that you've never seen before, that feature that is just there. It's not really promoted, but it's just so useful. And shattering the backboard, to me, that'd be one of those things that is just happens randomly, not too often, obviously, certainly not with every player, but when it happens, just giving you that exciting moment on the virtual hardwood. I love that.
Also, I wouldn't want them to tie it into a badge. I would want it to be a random thing that plays out. But if they wanted a reason to put it in, they could always tie it to a badge. So let's say Shaq has the glass breaker badge and he has it set to Hall of Fame. It would increase the likelihood of him breaking the glass in the game. And it would be a fun badge to assign to your player online. And imagine you're playing online with other hoopers and you're in the rec or whatnot, and you shatter the glass. What an awesome moment that would be. So no, I wouldn't want them to tie it to a badge, but if they wanted a reason to implement it into the game or a way to implement it and to be able to tie it into something you can get, for your player in online modes as well, I think that would be a way to do it.
Oh, yeah, I think there needs to be conditions as far as a badge or strength rating or something like that. And it should still be rare, because it's not like we see backboard shattered every day back in the 80s or 90s. It was still a very rare occurrence.
Exactly. So I'm going to get to the responses, Andrew. So on X, Steven at the Live King states, choose a taunt and get teed up. Choose to fight would be nice, though, especially online. So he's choosing choose a taunt as his main choice. And you can do that actually in Madden. And I know he plays Madden. Like, you have an option to like taunt or celebrate, etc. It's controlled by your right stick, and you flick it up to celebrate or taunt, or to the right, etc. So that's been a welcome addition in the Madden series. And obviously it makes more sense for the Madden series right now because you're allowed to show more emotion, you're allowed to do more showboating, you're allowed to do more celebrating, as opposed to the NBA where it's definitely more restricted in that way.
It's also been in NBA Live as well. Flick different directions on the stick after a basket in Live 18 and 19.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not a new idea. The Cobra Gaming, so at the Cobra Gaming states, I put the idea out to 2K with this shattered glass Jordan recreation. It really shouldn't be hard to implement this into the game somehow. Would be especially dope for a game-winning dunk online in the city mode. Coach Parker states, choose a taunt or draw up a play. So he would be happy with either. At Bucky T states, draw up a play during timeouts for sure, man. So he agrees, probably for the big picture, something that the most people would be interested in would be, draw up a play. basketball video game. So at B-ball video game states break the glass with an exclamation point. I know he loves that. I believe that he posted Coach K footage on breaking the glass at 1 point. So he would love to see that come back. At Mike Purchard states, honestly, I think draw up a play. Sure, it was nice to see Shaq break a backboard and Mutombo wave his finger, but both would be an overkill in the online world. So yeah, I definitely agree there, Andrew. I think that if you allowed the taunting, especially, I think that it would be absolutely abused in the online space. I would almost feel like if you allowed taunting in the game, if there was a feature, that it could only be used in offline mode because it would be ridiculously overused in the online space.
Well, we see those celebrations already in park games, and again in NBA Live 18 and 19 did it as well. And some people feel that that's already overkill. So yeah, if you could taunt too much, then you can just see people taunting all the time and not getting back on defense, already kind of a problem. So yeah, there's definitely a drawback to it. And even shattering the backboard, again, as cool as it would be, it's not as cool if it happens all the time. If it's delaying the game, obviously it's not going to delay the game for 20 minutes or 40 minutes or however long it takes to bring in a new backboard in real life. You're not going to do that. There are some acceptable breaks from reality, even in a sim game, Derek. But you don't want to overdo it because, one, it becomes less special. Two, it just gets annoying after a while. And to the point about breaking the backboard in park games, it would be cool to just pull down the rim or to bend the rim. And thinking back to the original NBA Street, Derek, it'd be a really fun way, a fun Easter egg, if you will. Well, I suppose it's not an Easter egg if it happens every time, but it would be a fun detail if you do finish a park game with a dunk to follow in the footsteps of NBA Street. And I know that 2K doesn't like to follow in EA's footsteps, but a good idea is a good idea, to finish the game with a busted rim if you end it on a dunk.
Hey, you could break the backboard in NBA Jam on Fire Edition too.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, and that looked great in that game. So it wouldn't be paying tribute to NBA Street. I know that you could do it to win a game on Street, but you could do it in NBA Jam on Fire Edition too. So Roy states the ability to break the glass like in the NBA Jam games, it would be so cool for either it to happen randomly or after a certain number of dunks or after a hard dunk. Shaq, KG, even Sir Charles, I think, did it once. Chuck LA states draw up a play. Teddy Bear the Gamer just shows a gif of Shaq shattering the backboard and then falling on his back and the glass falling on him when he was against Ahmad Rashad. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Big J states draw up a play. And him at Shrek 2 Fanboy says, of the four, definitely draw up a play, clipboard option, especially if it properly positions players. I feel like fighting would be a close second because there are times online when it's no longer about winning. So he just wants to fight people online if, the games get out of hand. I don't blame him there. But, most responses are related to drawing up a play. We did have a couple of responses on Discord. Vetman states, choose to taunt. 2K has long needed legit technical fouls in the game. They're not pretty for the NBA to have in a game, I know, but they're part of the real NBA game. ZCB44 says, the child in me says, break glass. The adult in me says drawing up a play. So those are the community responses. I think most responses were related to drawing up a play, with the second most popular, breaking the glass.
Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to my inner child, CCB. I'm going to have to go with breaking the glass. But in all fairness, yes, drawing up a play would be the more productive addition to the game, no doubt about that.
Agreed.
And as far as fighting, Derek, I will say I've never been a fan of the idea of putting that in basketball games because we don't see a lot of great fights. I find compared to hockey, for example, I know that the NHL series has had some advanced fighting mechanics. I remember playing the demo of one of the NHL games, can't remember which, but it would go into first person and you would actually use the analog sticks to throw hands and to throw punches and have control over it. Don't know if they took that tech from the Fight Night series or whatever, but that suits a hockey game, obviously, but we don't see those kinds of fights that often in the NBA, so I'm not a big fan of adding it. I understand certainly why the NBA doesn't want to add it, but I'm not going to tell people that they can't want that, because we're all entitled to our opinion, but I must admit, I've never been a fan of the idea.
Where does it end, Andrew? Are they going to start allowing you to recreate Malice at the Palace and you get to start running into the stands and punching fans? I know there's some people out there that might like that, but certain things, in my opinion, need to be kept away from basketball video games. I don't think fighting would be a good thing to add to a hoop title. I do think that taunting could be added offline, but in a way where it can't be used all the time, right? Like a way where it only pops up every now and then if the situation calls for it, if you make a big play, etc. And it would have to be done tastefully. So be careful what you wish for when it comes to adding things like taunting and fighting to a basketball game.
As for technicals, of course, there was a fun Easter egg. You mentioned it in the Discord in NBA 2K14. I believe it was in 2K13 as well. If you had the Kinect connected to the Xbox and any microphone connected on PlayStation as well, that if you swore and the game picked that up, you would get a technical. The bench would be assigned a technical for swearing. I got hit with that playing NBA 2K14 for PS4 on PS5. Forgot to turn off the microphone in the controller. Muttered some profanity at a call that I didn't like, and then was reminded of that Easter egg when I got teed up.
Yeah, I got teed up playing the Xbox One version of NBA 2K14 with the Kinect hooked up, and it was late in the game, and I got called for a BS offensive foul, and I swore and did not realize that by swearing I could be assessed a technical foul in the game, and it was a crucial call, actually. I ended up losing that game by 1, I believe. So that technical foul actually was a major factor in me losing that one.
Knowing how things go on the open mic chat in the rec, that would just get everybody just kicked from the game if they were assessed technicals.
Yeah, exactly. It would be whoever would win the game would be the one that didn't swear.
Last man standing.
Most. Yeah. Right, exactly.
But thank you to everybody who responded to both of this week's community questions. As we'll always say, Derek, we love having this interaction with the community.
So many responses. I absolutely love it. So many people were into both community questions, and most of the answers were well thought out as well. So, yeah, thank you to the basketball gaming community for always bringing it.
And, of course, please keep the conversation going in the comments, on social media, in the forum, and in our Discord. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media, that's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube at D43 and on the NLSC D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.